10 years ago, maybe, our church went through a major metamorphosis. It went through a change dynamic. I had been preaching and teaching and as given by the Lord for the years that I had been pastor of this congregation. And we had taught and preached as God gave us. In 1991, the year of the Vestals, God gave us the vision of ATLAH. And what we like to say today in terms of making note of this particular message is call it the sign and the report, that the Vestals are a sign to ATLAH. And their world leadership, as they're stepping into it, indicates our closeness to the fulfillment of the prophecy of ATLAH. And we'll address that even more so as we go forward. But sometime after the period, we have the Katrina event, and we spoke about the horrific behaviors of the people of the South Ward of St. Bernard's Parish there in Louisiana, New Orleans. And from that period on, it seems that there was a break in could no longer forbear in identifying the major problems that were facing us as a community, facing our churches. Pastors down in New Orleans hired private planes to put their Rolls Royce and Bentleys on to fly them out of the flood zone of Katrina to Houston and to Atlanta. And then they took the whole top floor of the Marriott Hotel in Atlanta and in Houston and other places, and left their parishioners in the water to drown. They kept their cars above the water. And that is par for the course of the churches of that day and of this day, of the so-called pastor, the mega churches, and the good old preachers that preaching that good old black gospel, prosperity gospel. And we pointed it out. And it seems that from that point on, it just continued to flood. A number of people, I remember one woman who had been a businesswoman, had been a real estate developer. We're talking about 15 years ago now. And she worked in this community, she lived in this community, she came and every time she'd sell a house, she'd come and give 10% of the commission to the church. Obviously, sometimes she'd make a commission as much as $50,000 or $30,000, and each time she did that, she'd bring a $5,000 or $3,000 check to the church. And she's quite consistent, and in fact, she was trying to help us maneuver the sale of our firehouse at one point in time. But when I pointed out the hypocrisy of these churches and the ripoff, but more specifically the ignorance of the church member, that the pastor thought more about his Rolls Royce than you, and he left you there drowned. And I watched on that Sunday afternoon that flood. Katrina came in to New Orleans there in the Gulf of Mexico. And Elizabeth and I sitting watching television. We saw those people going into the dome. And I said, they're not going to make it. And then we watched as the days went by. We didn't see one pastor of prominence there in the dome with the people, trying to help organize them. They'd all fled to Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Houston, every place, and taken up hotels on their private jets, by the way. And those people, those young people coming out of St. Bernard's Parish, the 9th Ward, and other places there, as you know, New Orleans is 16 feet below sea level. The regular world is at sea level. New Orleans, like a bowl. The water from the river of Mississippi rolls across the banks down into and can flood the whole thing and make it a river, make it a lake. Effectively, New Orleans, the city of New Orleans, could be a lake. It is so deep below sea level. And not one preacher, for days we watched on television, not one preacher was there organizing, telling people go here, go there. Not one leader stood up and said, the men come over here and we'll organize boats and we'll organize food and we'll organize rescue. We'll go back into the parishes to see if anybody's left in the houses. We'll go back and search for people while the rain and the floods were rising and the levees were breaking. And the people were left to themselves. Reports are emanating up out of the dome that men were raping little girls inside the domes. The toilets were not being cleaned. The places weren't being flushed. The When the food came in, when it did come, the men took it, and they were fighting everybody else. It was a mess in New Orleans. We all witnessed that, and I pointed it out because that is who we are when we're left without the supervision of white folk. And people hated me for that because that's who it is. The church does not have a specific leadership structure and style. Now they know how to put on great choirs and put on great organs and all of that kind of a thing. But in a crisis, they have no management skills whatsoever. And they left those people there in New Orleans. Even the mayor of New Orleans, I forget his name now, called it the Chocolate City. Whatever his name was ripping the city off as well. And from that point on, next thing we know, we're now in the midst of the No Do No Rain event here. And Obama comes along. And God says to me that Obama is not the president that Hillary is. And I got up and I said it. And when I said it, in the night of the election, Obama won with the kind of shock and dismay that many also happened with Hillary and Tribulation Trump. Elder Ramos so famously tells me he was angry with me that night. But Elder, I had to do what God said. And now with hindsight, if we look at the atrocious behavior, the lawlessness of Tribulation Trump, the disregard for normality, the disregard for the Constitution, the outright racism that he promotes, and the engendering of racism, the division that he is promoting, the hatred, and the fact that he has no shame. And this is the president of the United States, the most powerful nation on planet Earth, has a buffoon in the White House. But he succeeded Obama. My statements were and are then that Obama was illegal, and so is Tribulation Trump, put in by the Russians. Hillary should have been president. I stand by that even to this day. Now, as a result of it, we find ourselves in the political mix that we have. But what I want to point up is not so much the political demographics of that, is that our church was devastated by the prophecy. And people walked out. Well, Pastor Manning, I'm gone. And false prophets and all kinds of other things were said about me, but I stood my ground. I did not move because I knew that God spoke. Many times when faced with circumstances, Elizabeth has observed after watching me sleep and get up and eat for these years now, that no matter what might be facing me or what might be the threat or intimidating me, there's one thing that's always sure with me, and that is this: I know that the Lord is with me. I know that whether other people know it or believe it or not, and I don't flinch, I don't back up, I don't take back. I can't be defeated. You will not cause me to beg bread, and you're only wrong if you oppose me. The Lord is with me. And so I understand that even now, but it affected our church. And the membership, a membership that I'd worked very hard to build this church, to pack this church and build the membership as it were, it just dissipated with the Obama. And everybody ran with Obama, and I'm left here with you. Thank God that you're still here. And then came an influx of Japheth people, as I did not particularly put out an antenna to bring in Japheth people to the church. I just continued to preach. But many of you will note that even prior to Katrina and prior to Obama, the preaching that we do, though it may seem to some as being very tense and very strong, it has always had an appeal to Japheth people. Since I've been the pastor of this church, Japheth people have always been members. And at one point, the larger number of members were Japheth people than black people for a church in Harlem. And right now, there are hundreds of Japheth people that will listen to me right this very moment. In fact, I had a conversation with David Duke, of all people, a week ago, because he listens to me. And he listens to me intently to what is being said. So whatever else I'm saying, Japheth people or other people, the words, they may be shocking to you, but they hear the love, they hear the humanity that I speak and the truth that I speak. And they know the gospel I preach is without color. Though I talk black and white or Hamite, Japheth, a Shemite, they know the gospel I preach. And so they've joined this church for years and are members of this congregation even now as I speak. But that happened to us. Now, a year ago, we're in the month of July, the year is 2019. A year ago, thereabouts, our church was attacked. It was attacked viciously. The ministry was attacked. The school was attacked. And the reports were sent out to try to get all of you that were left here to leave this church. That was the attempt. And the people who made the attack, including Jewish lawyers that were in the mix of this process, it didn't just go down with these few handful of people. There was a concerted effort, even with Jewish lawyers in the mix, to try to bring down this house. And they thought that they had the clinch to get you out of here, that you were going to flee, you were going to leave. They were amazed that you did not. But what I want to say, having expressed all of that, and I promise not to inflict myself upon you much further, but even with that attack, the question is now, a year later, I had said to you, I promise you, and I really meant it from the depths of my heart, I was not going to talk about the extraordinary accomplishments of our students, our school, their college acceptance, and the $237,000 given to a 16-year-old girl going to leave truth at home by herself, and the $260,000 men who got scholarships. Two of our young boys, one 17, one 18, got $160,000 scholarship money each. I said I wasn't going to talk about that anymore. And I was minding my own business on yesterday when Captain Lewis called me and said, Elizabeth just got accepted at New York University. Bam, hung up the phone. What is this? I mean, so now I got to say something again. I got to go right back to the unusual move of God's arm and hand upon this church. So my message this morning is, whose report do you believe? Do you believe the report of them that viciously attacked us? Do you believe the report that God is with them that viciously attacked us? Do you believe that God is blessing them? Do you believe that God is with them? Or do you believe the report that you've seen coming out of this church for the last 1 year? Whose report do you believe, and who hath the arm of God been revealed to? Has God's power been revealed in this church? Stand up and give God a round of applause. Now, who do you believe? You believe them? Or you believe these extraordinary blessings that God is pouring out? We have never, in all the years that we have been pastor or leader, we have never had the kind of blessings being poured out upon our young people like they're being poured out now. And by the way, Elizabeth's not the last one that we're going to get a great report. Others are coming as well. It's just beginning. So I'll ask you. Someone sent me a picture of Gabriel Lewis up at Fordham University, standing there with a white polo shirt on, a pair of nice slacks, and a Harlem ATLAH pose standing there at Fordham University. How do you get from where we were a year ago to Gabriel, Israel, being at Fordham in the STEP program representing the ATLAH World Missionary Church? It just doesn't get any better. Whose report are you believing? Are you believing them outside? And do they have anything to show? But has the arm of God been revealed over and over and over and over and over? Elizabeth said something during the Four Wombs event. Elizabeth stood here in this pulpit, and while her acceptance at New York, a very prestigious school, had not come to pass, but she stood here in faith, and she said, and I'm paraphrasing a part of it, and I don't want to get very graphic or descriptive, but she said, I'm not leaving this church. She was talking to somebody outside. She said to them, I'm not leaving here. Leave us alone. And she took her seat.
But I have seen my mom go through a lot and go through a lot of pain. And I want to thank my dad and my sister for being there at a time where I was young, but I saw it, but I couldn't explain. Yeah. And if you loved my mother, you would leave her alone. That's all I have to say. I don't need to say anything else. You wouldn't keep putting her through the pain that you have put her. If you loved her, if you missed her, you would leave her alone if she does not want to be bothered. I still don't understand. I'm going back, when she was talking, I went back to myself at 14 years old. I'm like, I'm 20 years old now. Stop, just please. It hurts, and it hurts me, and it hurts Genesis, and it hurts Gabriel. Just leave us alone. We're fine where we are. I'm happy here. There's nowhere else I want to be. There's nowhere else to go. I don't have a plan B. If this goes down, oh, auntie, anybody out there for me or my family? And I refuse, even if there was, I refuse to go back to a family that stepped on my mother. I can't. I have no relations. I cannot do it. I will not add that final knife. I cannot do it. And I refuse to do it. I know I don't say it a lot, but I really do love you, Mom. I really do.
And when heaven heard that, heaven said, uh-oh, she's got to go to New York University. He opened up the doors for her when you make those commitments, Elizabeth, when you made that commitment, that opened that door. When I say I'll never be defeated and I'll never beg bread, the devil has to step back. You put yourself in New York University. Give the Lord a round of applause by making that commitment. You said, I'm not leaving Pastor Manning. I'm not leaving this church. I'm not going to do it. And it's very painful. It's always very painful because I don't even like repeating it because of how it had to be and who it was to receive it. It's very painful. One of the more painful moments I've seen in this church. But God has openly rewarded you, and we are celebrating you today, and the celebration is just beginning. We can't begin to imagine what's going to happen when you step through those doors down at New York University and get a couple of years of that process under your belt, how you can then begin to manage the world. We give God the praise. Y'all can take your seats. Whose report? Take your seats. Whose report do you believe? And whom have the arm of our God been revealed? We have gotten Madre Bowman, Principal Bowman, and most of our students have graduated and the vessels have gone on and they've done well. But this year alone, more than $700,000 was given to just a handful of students. I can count them all on one hand, but $700,000 given out in scholarship money. That doesn't happen easily. We're going to stop talking about Anna. 16 years old, got $237,000 of scholarship money at 16. And she loves Pastor Manning. And she loves this church. But look at what God has done and the university that God has put her in and the places that she can go. So I think that when we look at the prestigious schools, I told Elizabeth after the graduation out at Berkeley, Elizabeth, you can do better than that. Yes. Now, I know that your mother's in Berkeley, Princess. Praise the Lord. I know that your honorable brother, Elijah Lewis, the Honorable Elijah Lewis, is in Berkeley as well. And y'all gonna go on to other things as well. You will not be allowed to stop after Berkeley. You gotta go someplace else. But I told Elizabeth you could do a whole lot better now. You're brilliant, you're smart, and You've been beat down. You've been left for dead. You've been kicked to the curb. But we've never stopped loving you. We've never stopped believing in you. And we've never stopped raising our voice against those who raised their voice against you. And so God has rewarded you openly for the things that he has in store for you. But the prestigious schools and the amount of scholarship money that has been given out, Bennett, you know, one of the things that I'd like to be able to say to the congregation, first of all, every organization needs a leader. You can't have a committee-led organization. It needs a leader. It needs a visionary. And Bennett, you know, you and I, Anna's got $237,000. Jeremiah got $160,000. Christian Ebenyebu got $160,000. And others got money as well. I think Hallelujah got $60,000. And I will not tell you what Deborah got. We'll announce that later. But you know, Bennett, where's Ruth Brown? Is she in the house today? When we started this school, Ruth Brown, you remember how we got started. A couple of scratch pads and nothing but except we just believed God, remember? You came in and helped structure it, and you had been a school teacher and had graduated yourself at the Bronx High School of Science. People don't know how brilliant you are. And so we tapped you to do that. But Ruth and Bennett, both of y'all used to work at the post office. Ruth Brown, you know how much Bennett has sacrificed to bring the school to where it's at now in terms of money, her own children. I remember when her young girls were very young, like Truth and Zipporah. They were very young, believe it or not. And they needed health insurance. And we didn't have the money to pay for Bennett's daughter's health insurance, or Bennett's health insurance, because there wasn't anything coming into the school. But we never closed the doors, Ruth, Bennett. We never closed the door. People don't realize how much what is happening now is because you were willing to give up money. You were willing to give up the opportunity to live lavishly or to live at least decently. You gave up a $100,000 job at the post office so that this school can be. So I think that I think that in all this great celebration, let us not forget the shoulders upon who these young women are standing upon, and the sacrifices that have been made by this congregation in order to keep the school alive, to keep the lights on, to keep the copy of paper and keep the computers going. People have sacrificed. So I would say to anybody who's considering they want to give something to the students, that's the wrong person to give it to. Yeah, they've done well, but we have sacrificed. Bennett has suffered. If you got a monetary gift you want to give to Elizabeth, you think you ought to give it to her. She's not the one that's deserving. Without Bennett, without her sacrifice, Elizabeth would not be. We brought this family into this church and pulled them together, and Princess and Captain Lewis stayed here and fought no matter what. It was that event. That's what needed to be honored rather than honoring these two. We appreciate them, but that day is yet to come. Go back and try to give Bennett an all-expense vacation to Hawaii. For the year, she got no salary. She got no payment. She was unable to buy medicine for her children, unable to send them to proper doctors. She was trying to doctor them and say, those are the people that need to be rewarded. And anybody with half of a Holy Ghost will be listening to what Pastor Manning. When Pastor Manning says, this is where your giving should go, this is what you should do, they will humble themselves and realize you don't run a damn thing in here. Pastor Manning is the leader of this church. He's the one who's watched what's going on in here. Oh, and the sacrifice continues. It continues. Even now, there's great sacrifice being made on behalf of the students. and the people that work as staff.